Let's see if Allah makes it easy for us to talk about the opening supplication and seeking refuge. So we've covered the intention and standing and saying Allahu Akbar. Now the next obligation, as you know, is reciting Al-Fatiha. But before you recite Al-Fatiha, after you said the takbir, it's recommended for you to say the opening supplication and to seek refuge. After the integral takbir, which is the takbir of consecration, it is a prophetic practice for the imam or anyone else to recite the tawajjuh formula. Tawajjuh means directing oneself. Because you say, wajjahtu wajhiya lillazi, I turn myself. And this dua is also called al-iftitah because it opens the prayer. After the integral takbir, it's a prophetic practice for the imam or anyone else to recite this tawajjuh formula. And then that is going to be followed by seeking refuge. But let me take this out right here. Followed by seeking refuge, that's true. But if I take that out, then after the integral takbir, it is a prophetic practice for the imam or anyone else. So imam means leader of the prayer. Anyone else means a follower in the prayer or a loner praying by himself. So in all those cases, this is recommended. It's a prophetic practice for the imam or anyone else to recite the tawajjuh formula in his prayer. This dua that's also called al-iftitah, the opening supplication. So it's a prophetic practice for anyone who's praying to recite this tawajjuh, except for the funeral prayer. He doesn't say it for funeral prayer. For funeral prayer, you're going to say your takbir, that's your consecration, and then you're going to say, you're going to seek refuge, and then you're going to recite Al-Fatiha without reciting the opening formula in the funeral prayer, and without reciting a surah after the Fatiha for the funeral prayer. Or for fear of missing the recitation, or for fear of missing the prayer time, yani, you're in some situation where you fear missing either of these, then skip this dua and start your recitation. Start your prayer. When else you're not going to say this supplication that we didn't even mention its words yet? You're not going to say this supplication if you join the prayer late and the imam is not standing. When you said Allahu Akbar to join the congregation, the imam was not standing. So you're not going to recite this supplication. You're going to say Allahu Akbar and then do whatever your imam is doing. But there is a case. You say Allahu Akbar to join the prayer, and the imam is not standing, he's sitting. And then you want to sit with the imam, but you have to say the takbir standing. So you are standing, you say Allahu Akbar with the intention to follow the imam so that you could sit. And you said Allahu Akbar, and then the imam said Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, officially ending the prayer before you could even sit down with him. Now, because you're already standing and you just started your prayer. Now you are going to recite this dua, the opening dua. And you're not going to say this dua if you interrupted your prayer for some reason or another. If you interrupted the prayer because of religious impurity, for example, or for some other reason, meaning you actually started your prayer, so you said Allahu Akbar with an intention. So you got into your prayer. And then before you commence with the dua, you got out of your prayer, you broke your prayer. So do you still recite this dua? No, it's not here sunnah for you to recite this dua in this case. So what is this opening supplication? The wording, the wording of the first means, because we mentioned here, the opening supplication and seeking refuge. So this digression is covering two supplications. So the wording of the first is as follows. وجهت وجهي للذي فطر السماوات والأرض حنيفا وما أنا من المشركين. That's Muslim's version, Hanifa. But Ibn Hibban narrates it as Hanifa Muslima وما أنا من المشركين. إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين لا شريك له وبذلك أمرت وأنا من المسلمين. So that's the opening supplication. And there's more you could add if you wanted to. And after the tawajjuh supplication, it is a prophetic practice to always recite the isti'adha in a low voice. Yani, even if it's a loud prayer, you recite the isti'adha, the seeking of refuge, in a low voice. It's a prophetic practice because Allah says, فإذا قرأت القرآن فاستعذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. When you want to recite the Quran, seek refuge with Allah from the cursed devil. If one leaves out the opening supplication deliberately or forgetfully, then he starts seeking refuge, then he does not go back to the opening supplication. So the sequence is for you, you're standing facing the Qibla, and then you say Allahu Akbar to initiate your prayer. And then you say وَجَّهْتُ وَجْهِيَ لِلَّذِي, that dua, until you say وَأَنَا مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. That's the end of that dua. And then let's say you don't recite more of that dua, there's more. Then you say أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, but under your breath, low. And then you recite Al-Fatiha. So anyone who leaves out the opening supplication deliberately or forgetfully, because the opening supplication is right before seeking refuge. So whoever leaves that out deliberately or forgetfully, And then he started seeking refuge. So he skipped the dua and he started seeking refuge. Then he does not return back to the dua, the opening dua, because you missed its spot. You need to put it in its proper spot. It is disliked to skip the seeking of refuge. To not say, A'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim. But it's not recommended to repeat this after standing up from the sujood of recitation. So, person's praying. He recited an ayah of sujood. So then he, in his prayer, goes down to sujood. Then he comes back up to finish reciting. When he comes back up to finish reciting, he does not repeat A'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim here. He missed its spot. And it is disliked to skip seeking refuge. And it's not recommended to repeat it after you stand up from the sujood of recitation. Nor is it recommended for someone who cannot recite the Fatiha properly. And that's a good piece of knowledge for you there. If you teach a person how to recite Al-Fatiha, put isti'adha to the side until their Fatiha is workable. But when you sit down to teach a person Al-Fatiha, don't start with A'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim. Just start Bismillah. Yani you say A'udhu billah. I'm talking about if the student is repeating after you. If the student is repeating after you because you're teaching them the Fatiha, you can start saying A'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim. That's for you. Don't burden the student with the isti'adha until he has a working Fatiha. It's not recommended for someone who cannot recite the Fatiha properly. Any formula that is inclusive of seeking refuge, any formula inclusive of seeking refuge satisfies the sunnah. Any formula that's inclusive of seeking refuge would satisfy the sunnah, but the best formula is A'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim. That's standard formula. That standard formula in the prayer is better than, and when you recite the Quran, is better than أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. But that's valid. So the best is to recite this standard isti'adha in each rak'at, since bowing separates one recitation from the other. Yani, a person says, A'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim. Then he starts reciting all of what he wants to recite. Then he finishes, so he says, Allahu Akbar, and he bends over for ruku'. So now his recitation is done for this raka'ah. When he stands up for the next raka'ah, he should say again, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Because he's saying it for his recitation. And this recitation has been disconnected from the prior one. Therefore, it should have, that is, its own isti'adah. So, but more emphatically, yani most emphatic is to say it in the first rak'ah. And it was said that it's special to the first rak'ah. There's a saying that you just say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, one time in the beginning of the prayer. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Allah knows best. There's something here, though. Something I was waiting for. Ah. So there's also times when one would skip the isti'adha. And that is for everything he skips the iftitah for, except funeral prayer. You said, can we say opening supplication before the takbir? There's no meaning to saying it before the takbir. Because if you say it before the takbir, you have not initiated your prayer. So then you wouldn't be saying it as a sunnah of the prayer. Ameen wa iyyakum. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Allah knows best. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك